On the early morning hours of December 11th, 1986, 7-year-old Phoebe Ho would disappear while walking to a Royal Vista Elementary School in South Pasadena. Just a few days later, after she went missing, the grisly truth would finally unravel, and the race for a killer will begin. South Pasadena historic landmarks contribute to its beauty and stunning location. Just located about 15 minutes from downtown Los Angeles and home to the famous Rose Bowl, Pasadena can be the ideal tourist attraction, which include shopping, fine dining, and amazing scenery. This is one of the reasons why Kenneth and Sharon Ho would migrate with their 3 young children from Taiwan to Pasadena in 1983. Once settled in the community, Kenneth and Sharon Ho would make a living by selling shoes at the Pasadena swap meet in order to provide the necessities and stable income for the couple's 3 children, which included their 14-year-old daughter, 12-year-old son, and their youngest daughter, 7-year-old Phoebe. According to Phoebe's teacher, Virginia Harrington, Phoebe was described as being a very sweet, calm, quiet, but naive child who always kept a smile on her face, and she was a pleasure to have in class. And on that cold morning of December 11th of 1986, 7-year-old Phoebe Ho would wake up and get ready for school in her South Pasadena home. And after breakfast and brushing her teeth, Phoebe would put on her coat and grab her backpack and head out the door towards a Royal Vista school, which was only 4 blocks away from her home. During her walk to school, Phoebe's cousin Lana saw Phoebe walking up El Central Street towards their school. She stopped to wave at Phoebe, but quickly realized the bell had rang for school, and she began to run to school. And when she looked back, she noticed that Phoebe was still lagging behind, walking slowly. This will be the last time that Phoebe was last seen before she disappeared around 7:55 a.m. that December morning. A little after 5 p.m., Kenneth and Sharon Ho would arrive at home after doing some shopping and running a few errands. Once they arrived at home, the couple will be greeted with their 2 eldest children, who had informed them that Phoebe still wasn't home from school. The couple began to frantically search around the neighborhood to retrace Phoebe's steps, but there was no sign of the missing 7-year-old girl. Soon, the couple will discover that Phoebe never made it to school that day. Fearing the worst, Kenneth and Sharon Ho would contact the Pasadena Police Department to report Phoebe missing. Volunteers throughout the community, including teachers, parents, and students from Royal Vista, will begin searching the surrounding areas and neighborhoods, searching endlessly for 7-year-old Phoebe Ho. The search would sadly come up empty, and the disappearance of Phoebe would become a mystery, and authorities' worst fears began to emerge that Phoebe wasn't just lost or injured, but she was kidnapped. The Pasadena Police Department would offer an award for $20,000 for the information and the details about the disappearance of 7-year-old Phoebe Ho. Days will pass by without any leads or information about the whereabouts of Phoebe until December 18th of 1986. A man was walking along 10 feet off a rural road near California 60 in Glen Avon. The man began collecting cans when he stumbled across a young child's body, which was lying in a ditch full of weeds in Riverside County. The body was fully clothed, wearing a jacket and white pants, and lying on its side. Shocked by the grisly discovery, the man would flag down some employees at a nearby boarding house and inform them of the gruesome discovery. They would immediately call the Riverside Police Department to report their findings. Authorities from the homicide department would arrive on scene and begin securing the surrounding areas and collecting evidence around the perimeter. The Riverside County coroner would arrive on scene and the body will be transferred to a local county coroner's office to conduct an autopsy. Upon investigation, it was determined that the child's remains were of a young Asian female between the ages of 5 and 7. The ME would positively identify the body as 7-year-old Phoebe Ho. She had suffered a gruesome, horrific death, which included being raped, sodomized. She was also tortured with a pair of pliers that were used to remove her breast before she was strangled. It was also determined that Phoebe had only been dead for 1 day prior to when her body was discovered. Homicide detectives would make the dreadful call to Phoebe Ho's parents, and the community became outraged with grief and sorrow as the reality was set in that the sweet, loving 7-year-old, quiet and friendly girl with a beautiful smile was never coming home. Yellow ribbons were placed all over the city of Pasadena as 350 mourners would gather to remember and celebrate Phoebe's life at a memorial service in Whittier, California on December 27, 1986 at 10 a.m. As the community continued to mourn Phoebe's passing and tragic death, authorities from the homicide unit will begin their investigation into who was responsible for taking 7-year-old Phoebe Ho's life. And on January 3rd of 1987, detectives would get a hit. They would request a search warrant for the home of 49-year-old Warren Bland. Warren Bland was suspected of the kidnapping, murder, torture, and death of Phoebe Ho. And during the search warrant, they would recover hair samples and fibers that were consistent with the DNA recovered from Phoebe's body. Soon authorities would have enough to charge Warren Bland for the kidnapping and murder of 7-year-old Phoebe Ho. Warren would go on a run and change his name to James Thaddeus Sterling and Charles St. Germain. And during his time on the run, authorities would discover that Warren had an extensive criminal background, which included forcible rape, robbery, molestation, assault with a deadly weapon, and many other dark and cruel crimes against children and adults. He was also accused of raping his previous wives along with his 2 stepdaughters. He would also be charged with rape and torture of an 11-year-old boy, and he also left a 15-year-old girl clinging to life after he slit her throat. Warren Bland's criminal record would extend from 1957 to 1987, in which he was suspected of killing an on-duty police officer back in 1957, but he was never charged with that crime. Authorities will finally apprehend Warren Bland just a few weeks later in Pacific Beach after he stole a car and a handgun. A standoff between Bland and the police would result in Bland being shot in the leg as he tried to avoid capture. Warren Bland was rushed to the hospital where he survived his injuries, and eventually he was released to police custody, where he stood trial for the kidnapping, torture, and murder of 7-year-old Phoebe Ho in February of 1987. But before being captured, Warren Bland was also suspected in the murder of 81-year-old Ruth Oss, whose body was found on February 4, 1987, bound, tortured, and naked in her San Diego home. A few years later, on February 24th of 1993, 56-year-old Warren Bland was found guilty for the murder of Phoebe Ho. He was sentenced to death. Warren Bland would begin to serve his time in San Quentin, California, and on August 30th of 2001, Warren Bland will die in prison due to natural causes. He was only 61 years old when he passed away. He was never charged with the murder of 81-year-old Ruth Oss. Even though authorities believe that he was responsible for other murders, they could never charge him due to lack of evidence. At the time of her death, Phoebe was only 7 years old, and she was a second grader at Arroyo Vista School in South Pasadena, California. We are here at the Rose Hill Cemetery in Whittier, California, at the final resting place of 7-year-old Phoebe Ho. Please continue to pray for the family of Phoebe Ho, and may her legacy continue to live on with those who miss her the most And rest in peace to this beautiful, pretty girl, Phoebe Ho. May we advocate for you, through you, and about you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share for more of these cases and great content. Until next time, don't forget to love each other, pray for one another, and spread kindness to each other. Thanks for watching.